Welcome, everyone, to another CTC Software webinar. My name is Sean Zerbis, the Director of BIM Development here at CTC Software, and today we're going to be continuing the HIVE CMS User Learning Series, focusing entirely today on how you can control the display of your content, making sure you see it how it's meaningful to you. Now, of course, as always, our webinars are recorded. And also, as always, we encourage you to throw your questions into the QA window or to the questions pane in GoToWebinar. And we try to answer them in line when it's relevant. And also, we save a QA session for the end after the kind of closing thank you, so to speak. So let's jump right in and see what we're talking about today. The HIVE CMS has what we feel are really good quality previews. And it's probable that you want to know how you can actually control them a bit to your benefit as an end user, so you can see exactly what you want. We've had a lot of questions. What's this little icon in the corner? How can I resize my previews? How do I see a little bit more detail before I load it in my project? So in this webinar, in this session today, I want to discuss exactly all of the details and controls that you need to know related to how you can display your content in your search windows. And these are user-specific settings, so you have full control over all these displays. And again, feel free to throw questions into the window while I'm going, and I'll try to make sure they get answered live throughout the actual discussion. So let's go through just the 4 main learning objectives that we're going to cover today. We're going to talk about how to understand, the display control bar, where it is, what the settings are, and all of that. We're going to talk and modify the preview image sizing. We will be selecting different kinds of layout displays for the content, so you can actually change how it's presented and how it's organized. And we're also going to do a really quick look at using the details panel to kind of have a bit more of a display of the information about your content before loading. Now, we have a really detailed details panel discussion already on our YouTube channel. We would encourage you to go check that out. But today we're going to talk really quickly about it because it's relevant to this topic as well. And since I'm not big on death by PowerPoint, we're going to be jumping in live into the HIVE CMS environment here. So I'm going to go ahead and pull that forward. And for right now, I'm going to pin it on screen so that it stays here on top of everything. And first off, we're going to talk about the display control bar. Now, before I can talk about the display control bar, I have to run a search of some sort. I can either just search something here, or I can use a pre-save search. I could use a number of different ways of running a search. We have webinars on that as well if you want to know how to run a search. I'm just going to use this pre-saved search to pull up some templates real quick, just so I can see some of the content that's available here, and it's going to give me my results back. So let's talk now about the display control bar. There's a few items you can display. One of them is the filters, and I recommend that you always have filters on and pinned on screen because it gives you a really powerful ability to control more about what's showing. In fact, we can see here that there are 2 filters applied, so I want to open up the filters panel and I want to pin that on screen. And we have a whole discussion about how to control and work with these filters. I would recommend you take a look at that webinar as well because it's going to give you a bit more information about how to deal with the actual filters themselves. For right now, I'm just displaying it from the display control bar here and pinning it on screen so it stays out there permanently. Additionally, there's a details panel, and we'll get to this one a little later, but this button here just simply toggles the details panel off and on, and we'll come back to that in a minute. To the right of that is the image preview image size slider. We're going to get to that in just a second as well. And then to the right of that are the 3 different major display styles for the tiles out there, either a tile-based view, a list-based view, or a table-based view. Now, I'm going to talk about these 3 first and switch between them. I'm going to go here. First off, I'm in the tile view by default, and that shows us just the tiles right here. I am going to switch to a list view. This kind of gives me some different information in addition to the tile. It shows me some extra data here, a little bit of extra detail. There's a table-based view as well. And I can see a lot of the data, but it's presented in sort of a different way, kind of spreadsheet style, columns and rows of information instead of the information all lumped together. My personal two favorite methods of displaying content is the tile view, which I use the most. I find it, for me, to be the most meaningful, and the list view here, which is sort of like that, but instead of it being just the individual tiles, it also has extra detail that I find meaningful. Now, I want to transition here a little bit, and I want to talk about the image size, the preview image size, and a bit about the preview icons themselves, because understanding how they work and what sizes are meaningful for you can really help you kind of decide which of the view styles you like, whether you like tile more, whether you like list view more, or perhaps even the table view. See, here in the table view, I tend to squish my previews down quite a bit because I want a lot more rows of data on screen. So I use this little slider right here to kind of control what it is I'm seeing. And depending on how big that is and how wide my preview column is here, I can kind of control what of the previews I actually see. Now, I personally, in the list view, I like to set the preview as big as it can be without pushing the row height. So I like to be balanced right about here, just about in the middle. Personal preference, that's kind of where I like my preview image sizes when I'm in list view. It's a little bit different when I'm in tile view. Here, I like to have the image be as wide as it can be, without pushing the width any wider. So right about there is where I like it. So I'm pretty much usually right in this little range right here, depending on which view it is I'm using. And Hive remembers what setting you have set and what the preview image size is every time you modify this and then close Hive. The next time you come back in, it will set the preview image size for you automatically based on what your settings are, right? So we already talked about this a little bit, but this is the layout display, and that's these little tiles over here, the tile view, the list view, and the table view. We've been switching between these. This is how you control that layout display there, in addition to your actual preview images. Now, I do want to point something out about these preview images. If you mouse over one of these, it's actually going to pop up sort of a larger image. Depending on how detailed the images are, you might get a slightly better display. An example of that might be, let's say I search inside of here for my MEP content, and I'm exclusively looking for drafting views. Let's just put in here views and see what shows up. Yeah, views is what I'm looking for there. I'm going to apply this, and we're just going to kind of see. There's a bunch of drafting views that show up out here. And so when I mouse over these, that little hover over preview graphic gives me a better idea of what's going on inside that little drafting view. In some cases, if there's enough detail, I can even read some of the text out there. You have the ability to toggle that preview off and on if you want to. If you don't like that hover graphic, you find it maybe a little distracting and you don't want it, that's totally fine. You can control that by going into your little profile settings here and editing your user settings. So if you don't like that hover preview, you can uncheck it, or if you want to control how much percentage bigger than the main preview it is, you can modify that right here as well. I like my hover preview being as large as it possibly can be, and I generally will always have it on. Of course, it's your choice, and that's why it is an option in the settings that you can fully control. So I'm just going to go ahead and save my settings here. Of course, by the way, if I uncheck this and save this, then what it will do when I mouse over the preview is absolutely nothing. And I believe that's the default on most of your accounts. You may want to go into the actual user settings and just verify that it's set how you like it. You're probably going to want the maximum preview graphic as well. And this way, when you mouse over it, you get quite a bit more detail. Now, when looking at these previews, I want to point something out. Notice how there's this little icon in the bottom corner. This is a part of the information about this piece of content. It's telling you the library it's associated to without having to show on the actual content or layout display here, without having to show this in list view, which also tells me the library it's associated to. I can also, at the tile view, just mouse over and very quickly see the name of the library, but I can see sort of a representation of what's going on. Now, I find that to be meaningful because if I was to, say, clear out all of these settings here and just apply it, this means I'm looking at a specific library as well. Let's clear that too and just keep Revit content only. While I'm looking through this Revit content, just scanning across real quick, I get an indicator as to what library this is associated to. This is my corporate content. this is a particular collection of content. Maybe it's customer content. If I scroll down far enough here, eventually I will probably find some out-of-the-box Autodesk content. Let's just see. Let's just type in doors here and see what shows up. Not doored, doors. That was silly. Well, it doesn't matter. It found it anyway. Found what I'm looking for. This is the Autodesk English US Imperial out-of-the-box library. And so you can see here 3 different icons that represent what the source of this content happens to be. All right? So just a quick indicator so you know what you're pulling from. If I want to pull a door and I want it to be my corporate doors, if I hadn't filtered from my own library, I can still at least see what the differences are here. And that helps me out. So then finally, I want to talk about one final thing here, and this is enabling the details panel. So again, we can show some details with the list view here. This can be meaningful, but sometimes I want a bit more information about these pieces of icons, and I want to display the actual details about them as well. So I'm going to pull this wider now because I'm going to open up the details panel. Here, I sometimes will use tiles. I will sometimes use list view. It really depends on what I'm trying to do here. In this case, I'm going to go ahead and use the tiles. But if I pick on something, anything, when I select it, it's going to give me a bunch more information about that content, what versions it's associated to, the family types that are associated to it, and all the parameters and parameter values that are associated to that piece of content as well. So I can get quite a lot of information about something. In this case here, let's just see if I was to, let's actually search for something that has a bunch more stuff. Doors. I'll use doors as an exact example here in this case. When I pick on, say, one of these doors, this is a good example. There's 2 types associated to that. This, by the way, is coming from the UK library as opposed to the English Imperial library. But here I can see 2 different types inside of there, and when I select between the 2 different types, it pulls me back the parameter values. So you can look at that information as well, and that is sort of an image display of your content prior to even loading it. So I can change the preview graphic, I can see the library information, I can change between a tile or list view, whichever is more relevant for me. With the details panel open, I can see the details themselves and see all the information about that particular element. And also, for that matter, what Revit versions it associates to and what parameter values maybe are different between different versions of Revit. There's a lot of information that's here at your fingertips that you can leverage for the display of the content prior to loading it into your project there. Okay, I'm about to jump into a Q&A section here. I'm going to unpin Hive from the foreground, but before I do, for those of you who don't like to stick around for questions and answers, I want to say thank you. And we always appreciate when you show up live and have the opportunity to interact with us. And certainly, if you have questions, well, you can throw them in the questions window and we will answer them as well. And also, as always, these webinars are recorded and will be going up to our YouTube channel, usually within a day. And so if you subscribe to our CTC Software YouTube channel, you can be notified exactly when these recordings go live. Certainly also, if you're here in the live webinar, you're notified when it goes live because we send that out as well. All right, final thank you. We look forward to seeing you all in the next webinar. We hope you have a fantastic day.